Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. Here we are back with another show, the Fantasy Bible Part 2, as promised. Hope you listened to the first part of this, where I look back at last night's game and also look back at the international game and then the early slated games. Having watched last night's game, obviously I called that a little bit wrong. I didn't expect the wide receivers to be so involved in the game. I didn't expect Kirk Cousins to throw for 506 yards. When it was one of those games that was an offensive shootout, which I didn't see coming. The bookies didn't see coming. No one really saw coming, and it was pretty bad from the Bucs from a coverage perspective. The way they covered London and Mooney. It's a strange one because they've played so out of their skin, and then this was the big area of concern coming into the roster this season. But they played so well. Zion McCollum is PFF's highest rated cornerback coming into this week, and they just didn't play well at the back end. They didn't manage to prevent anything at all. There's some dubious calls at the end of the game which don't help, and the game management's probably the biggest question going into that. But you got to take your hat off to Kirk Cousins. I did say that I didn't have high hopes for Bijan, and I was fairly right. I think he's going to land about where I put him at right about 15. So, I thought they would struggle to run the football, and they did, which is why I thought they'd put the ball in the air. I didn't expect to put the ball in the air as many times as they did. But you got to take your hat off to them. They made the plays to win the football game, and that's I didn't expect that, and I certainly didn't expect 60, 63, 66 points being scored on Thursday Night Football. So an absolute classic. If you've not seen it, go and watch that one. So we have 6 games to go through, 4 in the late slate, Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. We're going to start with, and I'm sorry to say, it's probably the worst of the bunch, which is Broncos Raiders. The Broncos are favored by 2.5 with that defense, which makes sense. The over-under set at 35.5, as I mentioned on last night's show, flagship show. So, look, this is predicting that 2 teams will score in the teens. That's what the bookies are telling you. So, that also tells you there's not a lot of play here for fantasy points. Before I get into breaking down the game, I'm just going to pull up my rankings for you and continue off where we were from last night. So look, the bottom line is this is 2 teams that defensively are very strong. The Broncos D has been lights out, and that just means there's not going to be a lot of fantasy points on offer here. So we have to be really careful about who we select in this game, and neither quarterback should be starting in most leagues unless it's a deep super flex league. Bo Nix at 26, Gardner Minshew is at 27. Don't be too shocked, by the way, if you see don't be too shocked if you see Aiden O'Connell start to come into this game towards the end of it if things aren't going well on offense. That genie's been opened, and that's something that we can sort of expect to see going forward. So we have to be a little bit careful and something we have to kind of watch, because I think we're going to get to the end of Gardner Minshew's time here in as a starter. Then you've got all the questions with the Devontae Adams trade, which I covered off last night, where I would like him to go, where I think he should go. So go listen to last night's flagship show. Lots of good questions and strategy in there that we cover through there. So make sure you go and tune in to that one. So if we're looking at this game purely on an offensive perspective and looking at fantasy points, Javonte Williams is the best running back I have in this game, and he is at running back 21. Zamir White is at running back 30. He is questionable, and Alexander Mattison is at 38. If Zamir White doesn't go, Mattison is definitely going to be the better option. But it's still going to be a really difficult one to commit a lot of resources to. So just be really cautious about who you start this week. Jacoby Myers is probably the best fantasy asset in this game from any of the skill positions other than Brock Bowers. He is wide receiver 17 this week with no Devontae Adams. Trey Tucker, who a lot of people would have picked up this week, is wide receiver 29. Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 35 as a volume play. They're my only wide receivers of note. I think Lil Jordan Humphrey's all the way down in the 60s. I think he's at 68 at this current point in time. Brock Bowers is my tight end 5. Greg Dolchis is not worth mentioning. He's all the way down at tight end 30. And then we've got the DSTs here. So I do have the Broncos as my DST 2, and hopefully you've got them rostered. Oakland, Las Vegas. I'll have it start hard. At 16, I think they'll make some plays, but I don't think they're going to be as high up as some of the other Ds this week. And then as for the kickers, I don't see there being a lot of points, so I don't see there being a lot of kicks. So Will Lutz is at kicker 16, Daniel Carlson at kicker 24 this week. Scroll down my wide receivers. All right, next game on the slate is the 49ers against the Cardinals. Biggest favorites of the week are the 49ers. They're favored by 7.5. Over under set 50, so lots of fantasy points here for both teams. So it should be a really, really good one to access and watch. As a result, both these QBs are high up there on my list. Brock Purdy is at 5 this week, and Kyler Murray is at 10. Just worry about the ceiling on Kyler Murray with the coverage, but definitely players I'll be having in my starting lineups as I own them. Jordan Mason is my running back 2 overall this week. James Conner, my running back 17 this week. So again, both must-start options. And we get to the wide receivers. I have Deebo Samuel as my wide receiver 3 on the week. And then I have Brandon Ayuk as my wide receiver 25. Jennings is a really tough matchup. I have him at 50 this week. Just a really, really tough matchup of the 3. The other 2 have exceptional matchups, which is why I have them where I have them. So I do expect them to utilize Deebo Samuel's matchup. So I'm all in for that. Marvin Harrison Jr. is my wide receiver 11 on the week. Feel pretty good about him where he is right now, but there is going to be some up and down weeks. So just be ready for those. George Kittle, currently questionable, is my tight end 3 on the week. So I expect him to be involved in this one. Trey McBride is my tight end 7 this week. Just a little bit of a dip this week. Just tough matchup. I think they'll have to go with the deep ball and try and get the ball more vertical, which is why I just don't think Trey McBride's going to get as many targets, but given the landscape, you're starting him and you'll be fine. The 49ers I have as my DST 5, and I wouldn't imagine starting the Arizona Cardinals. Anyone does. They're my DST 27 out of 28 this week. And then looking at the kickers, Jake Moody, my kicker 3. Matt Prater, who is questionable coming into this game, is kicker 18. So probably want to get another kicker rostered and make sure you're all covered there. But I see the 49ers really sort of dominating this game throughout. I think that the wide receiver matchups for Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are both exceptional. They're both really, really strong matchups that can be exploited here, especially Deebo Samuel. So Samuel is up against, I believe he's up against Sterling Thomas. Yeah, he's up. He's against Sean Murphy-Bunting. Ayuk's against Sterling Thomas. So Sean Murphy-Bunting is being heavily targeted. He's giving up 0.32 fantasy points per target per route run against him. Deebo Samuel is putting up 0.57 fantasy points per route run. He's getting targeted more and more with health. So I expect Deebo Samuel to have a huge week. I expect Brandon Ayuk to have a bit more of a get-right week. Kind of hedged him a little bit. I think people are going to have him higher in their ranks than I do. I'm one of these people that I react more to what I see and matchups. I'm just not quite there on Ayuk. I still think he's trying to get into quote-unquote football shape. I think the Cardinals will keep this somewhat competitive at times, but I think they could just get blown away from a time of possession standpoint where the 49ers are very good at dominating that time of possession with really punishing drives, creating turnovers on the defensive side of the football, and then just monopolizing that and just sort of squeezing the game away from Arizona. But the one thing we know about the Arizona Cardinals is they don't quit. They will constantly go until the end. So that's why I think they'll get some joy late on. I think you might see some garbage time points that will bring the scoreline a bit more in line with the projection. But I expect the 49ers to be dominant and control this one. This is a game I'm really excited about. The next one is Rams-Packers. Packers favored by 3, over under set 49. And I actually think I know that the Rams are really beat up, but I actually really expect this one to be a really good game for fantasy points. 3 of these matchups are what I'd call advantageous matchups. Romeo Dobbs for me has, and I talked a little bit about this on last night's flagship show, has for me the best matchup of anyone this week. So he is up against Tre'Davious White, who is giving up the most fantasy points per route run against him. The Rams are playing in zone a little over 77% of the time, and they're giving the joint most amount of points, fantasy points allowed per drop back at 0.54. So every time a quarterback drops back twice, they're giving away 1 fantasy point on average, which is quite significant. So if you think about how many times a quarterback drops back to throw, if he drops back 30 times, we expect Jordan Love to do as a minimum. That's 15 points they're giving up as a starting point on average in zone coverage. And that's only 77% of the time. So they're giving up more fantasy points when in man. So Tre'Davious White is the 6th most penalized DB in football. He gave away a pass interference in the end zone last week, giving up the most fantasy points per route run. He's giving up the most. He's the most targeted cornerback in the NFL currently. He's being targeted on almost a quarter of the routes per route run against him. And then you got on the flip side of that Romeo Dobbs. So Romeo Dobbs is, I write about this in the column. Amongst 103 receivers, that's wide receivers and tight ends, who have run more than 50 routes against man coverage, zone coverage. Romeo Dobbs is 7th in separation score according to fantasy points, with a separation score of 0.200, and he's sandwiched between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Mike Evans. That's really good company to be in. He's 9th in win rate, percentage of win rate. So he holds really good company there. He is being really successful in zone coverage. And then you've got a team that are really bad in zone coverage, giving up a lot of points in zone coverage. They're as bad as the Carolina Panthers in zone coverage, which is kind of telling you everything you need to know. So there should be a lot of points here. Having said that, I also think there's room for the Packers here. Tutu Atwell has a good matchup against Eric Stokes. I see similarities there where I actually think that this could be a bit of a ding-dong that goes backwards and forwards before I think the Packers sort of take control and wrestle this game away from the Rams. I do expect to win the game. So that is why I have Jordan Love as my quarterback 3 this week. I actually have Stafford all the way down at 23, and I think what I'm actually going to do is revise that. I'm just cautious of Stafford with his injuries, and he hasn't quite put up those big numbers yet as we kind of had hoped. So I'm just a little bit short on where he is, and that's why I think I'm probably going to revise this and put him somewhere around about QB 19. There's points to be had, and I think he will score them. I question the amount of touch. For me, it's touchdowns will be the one that kind of boosts him up. I can see Kyren Williams really sort of dominating this one. So it's why I have Kyren Williams at 3 this week. So I expect him to be the dominant force here. Whereas I have Jacobs a little bit lower than quite a few people. So Josh Jacobs I have at 22 because I just think the matchups are so good that they'll just put the ball in the air significantly more, which is why I'm just not relying on Josh Jacobs for the Packers this week. He still must start. Could always go the other way. They could get ahead and massage, but I expect the ball to be in the air quite a bit from the Packers. Let's look at receivers then. So I have Jaden Reed as wide receiver 7 this week. And then I have on top of that Romeo Dobbs, who is questionable. So this could all change. I've given all these great sort of insights about Dobbs. Could be questionable. He should go, from my opinion. He is wide receiver 24 this week. People are going to ask me about about Dontavian Wicks. I have him at 38. Had a stellar performance. His catch rate's really low. It's 22 targets. Everyone's talking about the air yards and the targets. Like, that's great. His catch rate is the 2nd lowest in the NFL currently. So I'm a little concerned there, which is why I have him down at 38. As for the wide receivers for the Rams, I have Tutu Atwell at 36. I have Jordan Whittington at 20. I think Whittington has the better matchup than Atwell, although Atwell also has a really good matchup. So I expect that to be exploited. But Whittington seems to be the safe pair of hands right now. He's getting a lot of routes and a lot of usage. I think Tutu Atwell is a bit more of a specialist, and they might imagine to go over the top and take advantage of that matchup. And him getting like a big score. That's kind of where I can see the Rams taking advantage and Atwell boosting up. But I think the volume is what keeps him a little bit further down which is why I have him where I have. But I would still play him. I still think he's a really good start. Colby Parkinson is my tight end for this week, purely on volume. He's getting a lot of work right now, and it's really good to see. Tucker Kraft is my tight end 8. So both of these tight ends are startable. And then the defenses, probably not 2 I'd be keen to start this week. I do think Green Bay can get some turnovers. I do have them at 10, so they are in the startable range. I have the Rams at 23, but I think there's probably better options, as I mentioned, probably better options on the waiver wire. And then as the kickers sit down here, what I do have as kickers is Josh Carty is at 17, and Narveson, who's missing, who missed a lot of field goals last week. I don't know how he's still got a job, but he is my kicker 22 this week. We'll see how he gets on, but he's playing for his NFL career this week. Last game of the window, this one is going to be, I imagine, a bit of a blowout. The Seahawks versus the Giants. Again, heavy favourites, 6.5 points. The Giants, the over-under, the Seahawks are heavy favourites, 6.5 points. The over-under is set at 43.5, and I think that's mostly going to be on the Seahawks side. The Giants could be without Malik Neighbors. If they're without Malik Neighbors, this could be really, really ugly. And actually, from a fantasy perspective, forget what it would do to Malik Neighbors. I actually think that Malik Neighbors not being in this game actually impacts the Seahawks quite significantly as well. So we all have to hope Malik Neighbors plays, because if not, I think they'll run Walker more. They'll do a bit more things differently. So I imagine the game will be very, very different as a result. So moving on to the last couple of games now. We've done the window. Oh, sorry. Kind of lost train of thought there. Someone come to it. So Seahawks Giants, as we mentioned, expect this to be a blowout for the Seahawks. Expect them to take care of business here quite comfortably. But yeah, we need Malik Neighbors to be there and to really push the fantasy scores up. Otherwise, I think that they'll run the ball through KJW. They'll probably bring in a bit of Zach Charbonnet in, as I was sort of explaining. Sorry for the sort of breaking continuity there. Real world got in the way there for 5 minutes or so. So I'm working on the assumption that Malik Neighbors is going to be there. He is a special talent. I expect to see plenty of him, plenty of Wan'Dale Robinson this week, hopefully, but we'll have to wait and see. So all of this is on the premise that Malik Neighbors plays. I've got Geno Smith as my quarterback 8 this week. I have Daniel Jones as my quarterback 25. Just as much as I see Neighbors driving his value up a bit, I do think there'll be mistakes. I do think there'll be turnovers against this D. Neighbors will slot in. I'll get to the running backs first. Having a bit of a mare this morning. I do apologize. Devin Singletary here is going to be the running back 19. I actually think it's a big week for Kenneth Walker Jr. Now, he is questionable, but I would expect him to go. He is my running back 6 this week. And Zach Charbonnet's down at 41, but he could get some garbage time work if this is a bit of a blowout. So just keep an eye on that one. If Neighbors does go, I have him at the moment at wide receiver 18. In PPR, he would be significantly higher, but I just think that the defense will keep him in play a little bit and just keep him a little bit in check. So I'm just a bit cautious on his upside this week, especially with the concussion, but I expect him to still be fine. I actually have this being more of a Wan'Dale Robinson game. I think that matchup is slightly better in the slot. So Wan'Dale Robinson is actually my wide receiver 14 this week, although he's also questionable coming into this game. I expect both to go. But at least with Malik Neighbors being a bit of a stretch. So I think that Neighbors will be targeted heavily, but how many of those grabs he'll get and how many of his game-changing plays, but what he will do is be that threat to push back the safeties and the cornerbacks and keep them honest. And I think that will enable Wan'Dale Robinson to get quite a bit of work underneath, and it will keep them in this game. If Neighbors doesn't go, you don't have that deep threat. Darius Slayton is nowhere in the same league And I just think that what that will do to the whole offense is they'll bring the offense forward. You'll see a lot of blitzes. You'll see a lot of sort of short range packages. A lot of the sort of spy tactics you'll get from the Seahawks defense. And I think what that will do is basically squash the Giants into turnovers, and then you'll see a runaway score, and that could really affect all outcomes here. Looking at the Seahawks, I have DK Metcalf at 9 this week, Jackson Smith and Jigba at 30, and Tyler Lockett at 43. I actually have Darius Slayton at 42 as it stands right now, because I just think if this game does get away from them, they'll need to do something different, and it will go to Darius Slayton. So that's kind of why I have him there. Talk a little bit on the the tight ends here, and there's not really much of a story here. I try and swerve both of them if you can. Noah Fant has got the forever questionable tag. He seems to be questionable every week. He's at 18th here, Johnson at 25. I don't expect either of the Titans to be heavily involved at this stage. And then it comes to the DST. So the Seahawks for me are the DST1 this week. I think they're going to bring a lot of pressure. They're going to bring a lot of heat. They're going to turn over Daniel Jones regularly and often, and make this a really one-sided game. So I have them as the best DST to pick up this week. And then looking at the kickers here, Jason Myers is at 7 as a result. You don't need to worry about starting Greg Joseph. He's all the way down at 27. That takes us through to Sunday Night Football, and it's Steelers-Cowboys. Steelers are favored by 2.5, which is a shock. I'm not sure I'm buying that one. I know the Cowboys haven't been brilliant, but I take the team with the best offensive players. And as much as the Steelers D is good, do we really expect Justin Fields to put on a clinic against the Cowboys? I'm not there. I'm sorry. So I don't agree with that. The over-under set at 44. I think that's a little low. I think that the Cowboys on their day are more than able of putting up a decent performance. But having said that, Dak hasn't played brilliantly. There are turnovers galore in this game. I have Justin Fields at 11. I think there is some angles for him to take advantage, but they need to get him to start using his legs. I think you'll start to see more of that as he's getting more comfortable in this offense. I have Dak Prescott down at 15, which is a bit of a shock, but that Pittsburgh D is going to find it really difficult to get some easy wins and easy throws here. Najee Harris is at 9. They can run the ball on the Cowboys, especially against this Mike Zimmer defense, which has been not great. It's probably been kind. Are we still in this sort of Rico Dowdle is yet to be fully unleashed. He's at 29 this week. I would not be playing Zeke Elliott this week. He's just, as much as he's going backwards, he's at 50. In my rankings, we're still waiting for the full takeover of Rico Dowdle. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. Looking at the wide receivers in this game, CeeDee Lamb is my wide receiver 2. I do think he can get some success in this offense. They're going to need to be creative and get him free away from matchups against Joey Porter and try and get him on one-on-one matchups or zoning matchups against the rookie on the other side. And I think if they can do that, they can definitely get some joy here. And CeeDee Lamb can take advantage of that. So he sits at 2 this week. George Pickens is a wide receiver 19, definitely a must start. The only other wide receiver under any consideration is Jalen Tolbert. Don't forget Brandon Cooks is already out for this game. I wouldn't start Tolbert. He is at 61 this week. Could go up in my rankings, and he probably will towards the end of the week, but I still think he is at best a desperate flex play due to volume. But I'm still wouldn't put him above sort of wide receiver 45 range, even with, I had this list to be fair, with Cooks in, and then obviously Cooks is out now. So I'm not sure I feel comfortable putting him any higher than like wide receiver 47. That's about where I would have him in a readjustment. I think there's some volume for him in a PPR. He'd probably be flex play, but in a half point or a standard, I'd probably be staying clear of that. I think he's going to struggle to get free this week. Jake Ferguson is my tight end 2. Pat Freiermuth is my tight end 11. So both of those are start options this week. And then we get to the defenses. Pittsburgh Steelers are at 9. The Dallas Cowboys are at 15. The one thing the Steelers haven't done this season is turn the football over much, and Mike Zimmer is not bringing enough pressure, and he's not forcing those situations. Zimmer's going to have to earn his salt. But I still think there's a route to the Cowboys winning this game on offense, but they're going to have to really turn it out. Mike McCarthy's under a lot of pressure to make sure that he does that. And then we look at the kickers here. Chris Boswell is at 11. Is at 11 this week. Brandon Aubrey is, of course, the kicker 1 with his depth. Okay. And then moving on to Monday Night Football. And it's Chiefs Saints. Chiefs are favourite by 5.5. The over-under set of 43, which is quite confusing because it's kind of just saying that the Saints offense is not a thing, which I don't think you can say that. They have put up points. They are a bigger threat than this is saying. I'm not saying that the Chiefs shouldn't be favorites, but 5.5 in an over-under 43, you're basically saying that you're struggling to see a pathway to the Saints scoring 20 points. And I just don't think that's the case. I just think that that's a little bit naive. I definitely see that. Now I can see the over being smashed, and I can see a pathway to the Chiefs winning by 5.5 points. But I don't think the Chiefs have hit top cylinder. I think they're going to struggle this week with the lack of passing options that they have. So with that in mind, I actually have Patrick Mahomes at 18 this week. This New Orleans defense is very, very good. And the fact that you haven't got a genuine outside threat this week, you've got a deep threat in Worthy, but you have Marshall and Lattimore there. You have some really good cover safeties and some corners there that they could limit that. You might get the big play. You might get the throw on the money, and those plays can happen. But I don't think they're going to get consistent success with really huge deep throws. So they're going to have to go over the middle, which I think you're going to see Travis Kelce targeted heavy and often in this game, as well as also some things out of the backfield and maybe using Carson Steele and this feels like a really good game for Kareem Hunt to get a lot of receptions. I just don't see them getting a lot of success vertically, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's kind of why I have Mahomes down at 18. I think you're going to have to win this game with the short intermediates and the ground game. As for the other side of the ball and talking about Derek Carr, I have him down at 23 currently. Yeah, I just because I think he will create turnovers for himself, and I think that's where the game will be lost. I trust Patrick Mahomes to play clean football. I can't say the same about Derek Carr. Alvin Kamara for me is my running back 4 this week, and then as for KC, they have a bit of a blend in my rankings, and it's really hard to kind of determine where they're going to be this week. So I've had a good crack at it. I've got Kareem Hunt on the edge of running back 2 territory. I have him at 25 this week, P. Ryan at 39 this week, and then Carson Steele at 64. I feel like those two are going to be a good tandem, but don't be surprised if one of them ends up taking the hot hand. My money would be on Hunt, but I could see it also going the other way as well. Now, despite having Carr at 23, I do have both his weapons reasonably well held here in Chris Olave at 13 and Rashid Shaheed at 15 in my rankings this week. I do think that they will put yards on. I do think that but I think the touchdowns will more likely come from Alvin Kamara this week with no Taysom Hill, who's fractured his ribs. So I think you're more than likely to see those guys get chunk plays and yardage, but I actually think that they're going to need to convert in the red zone, and I think Alvin Kamara will be the guy to do that, which is why I'm just a little bit low on the production of Derek Carr this week, but high on the receivers. If I look at Kansas City, it's a pretty similar story here. Xavier Worthy is at 39. I think he will have some success. I just question about how much, and I don't see there being a really high volume. So he's the only receiver I would start, but he's very much a boom or bust play this week. And if you've got better options, that would be the options I would explore. As I've kind of teased already, Travis Kelce is my tight end 1 this week. I feel really good that he's going to have a huge game because he's going to need to if they win this game. So I just think that he is best primed to do that. I have Jawan Johnson outside the top 20, so I'm not as concerned about him this week, even though there is, as I said, no Taysom Hill, who has fractured his ribs. As for the DSTs here, the Chiefs at 12, I think they can make some plays. I think that you will see them do a little something on D here. But I also think that the Saints shouldn't be completely discounted, but they're at 19. I think there is turnover opportunities for them. But at this point, the way I have it seeing is I'm expecting Patrick Mahomes to have a clean game. I think it might be pseudo a little boring, almost dink-dunky to kind of just get through this week before they evaluate what they want to do on offense going forward. Butker, I think, will be heavily important. I think they'll struggle to score lots and lots of points, so which is why I have Harrison Butker kicking quite a few field goals. He's my kicker too this week, and Groupie is my kicker 12 this week. Both of them I expect to get some points. I've realized I've not shared the DSTs or the kickers in here, so I'm just going to do this quickly while I wrap up, although I have gone through them all by name. But that's going to do it, I think, for this week. Sorry about the little interruption there. There was a bit of an interruption that happened, and it kind of threw where I was in flow around the Giants and Seahawks game. So hopefully I kind of repeat myself there, and I do apologize, but hopefully it kind of all makes sense and all my thoughts are out there for you. That's the kicker. That's the DSTs. I'll show you the kickers quickly. I'm going to try and get start sits out to you as well, and then also get a little content out for the Patreon. You can join the Patreon, patreon.com/5-hour-rush. Just some more thoughts and previews and bits and pieces. So make sure you do tune in to that one as well. You can join for just as little as £1 a month, and you'll get access to our chat. You'll get access to lots of information and the Patreon casts, which I think give a lot of insight into strategy, trying to identify next trends and bits and pieces like that. So it's all going to be really valuable and useful for you all. But that's going to do it for this week. Good luck this week. It's week 5. It's time to make a move if you are struggling and make some big moves. And I'm happy to support anyone with trade requests and thoughts of roster reviews. Join the Patreon. I'll look at any rosters. In fact, I've got some time tomorrow night. So if you're thinking like, I'm really struggling, I really want some opinions on how I can improve this roster, join the Patreon today. Join for £3 a month. Give it a month, see how you get on. Let me do some advice and analysis for you, and we can see how we get on. And like I said, I'll put the link in the chat here. But thank you so much as always. Good luck this week. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.